Nolan's car went off the road on a mountain pass in Colorado in December in a blizzard. He hit the guardrail, tipped into the ditch, and blacked out. When he opened his eyes, two men were leaning over him. Brothers, by the look of them. The younger one was loud, already pulling at the door. The older one was quiet, checking Nolan's body for brakes before he let anyone move him. They took him to their ranch because the road to town was already buried. He was hypothermic, bleeding from a cut on his forehead and shaking too hard to stand on his own. That night, finally warm, his body started doing what it hadn't done in years. His scent came back, and both brothers sitting on opposite sides of the room reacted at the exact same time. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I read every comment. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story. The ranch house was warm. That was what Nolan remembered most about the first night. Not the crash or the strangers who pulled him from a car that was slowly becoming a snowdrift. The warmth. The wood stove in the main room threw heat in waves, and the whole house smelled like pine smoke and coffee and bread from earlier in the day. Roan had carried him inside because Nash was pulling the truck into the barn, and Nolan had been too cold and too embarrassed to protest. "Guest room's down the hall," Roan said, setting him on the couch like he weighed nothing. "I'll get it ready. Don't fall asleep." Nolan nodded. His eyes kept drifting shut. He forced himself to sit up and look around. The living room was big, open-beamed ceiling, stone fireplace, leather furniture that was worn because it got used, not because someone bought it that way. Bookshelves lined one wall. A dog bed sat empty near the fire. Through a doorway he could see a kitchen with a long wooden table and more counter space than his entire apartment. Nash came in from outside, stomping snow off his boots, cheeks red from the cold. He grinned when he saw Nolan sitting up. "Look at that, vertical and everything, progress. Where am I? Han Ranch, about 8 miles from where you went off the road. The town's another 30 minutes down the valley, but that road's not going to be passable until they plow, and the county's got bigger problems tonight." Nash dropped onto the couch across from him, stretching his legs out. "So you're stuck with us for a bit. Hope you like dogs. There's 3 of them somewhere, and they're going to find you." "How long is a bit?" Nash glanced toward the window where snow was hitting the glass sideways. "Depends on the storm. Could be a couple days, could be longer." Nolan's stomach dropped. His phone, his samples, his car. His suppressants were in the glove box. His suppressants were in the glove box of a car that was sitting in a snowbank on a mountain pass. "My stuff," he said, and he could hear the edge in his own voice. "My bag. Did you grab my bag?" "Backpack and the duffel." Nash pointed to where he had dropped them by the door. "What else do you need?" "There's a case in the glove box. Small, black, medications." Nash's face changed slightly. Not prying, just noting. "We can try to get back up there tomorrow if the plows come through." "What kind of medication? Anything we need to worry about tonight?" "Suppressants." Nash was quiet for a beat. "Okay. How long since your last dose?" "This morning." "So you've got until tomorrow morning before it's a problem." "Basically." "We'll figure it out." Nash said it like he believed it. Like problems were just situations waiting for a fix. Nolan almost believed him. Roan reappeared from the hallway. "Room's ready. There's a bathroom attached. Towels are on the bed." He paused, looking at Nolan with an expression that was hard to read, assessing whether Nolan could handle being upright. "You should eat something before you sleep." "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry. Your body temperature is still low and you need calories. I'll heat something up." He disappeared into the kitchen before Nolan could argue. Nash watched him go. He's like that. Just let it happen. Arguing with Roan about taking care of people is like arguing with the weather. Technically possible, but deeply pointless. Nolan ate the soup Roan brought him because refusing felt worse than accepting. It was good. Homemade, thick, with chunks of potato and herbs he could not identify. He ate it sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that belonged to someone else. In a house that belonged to someone else, surrounded by the smell of smoke and pine and a life he had no part in. Roan sat in the armchair across from him, reading on his phone. The silence was heavy with the fact that they were strangers. "Thank you," Nolan said when the bowl was empty. Roan looked up. "Get some sleep. We'll sort out your car and your medication tomorrow." Nolan slept until late morning. When he woke, the house was quiet and the light through the window was flat white. His body ached everywhere. The cut on his forehead had been cleaned and butterflied while he slept, which meant someone had come into the room and tended to it without waking him. He followed the smell of coffee to the kitchen. Roan was at the counter, his back to the doorway, pouring coffee. One of the dogs, a large gray mutt with a dignified face, sat at his feet. "There's a mug for you," Roan said without turning around. "Cream's in the fridge." "How did you know I was up?" "Floorboards creak." Nolan poured cream into his coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Through the window he could see the property for the first time. Bigger than he had imagined. Fenced pastures, a barn, outbuildings, mountains rising steep and close. "Is Nash here?" "He went to check on the road and try to get to your car. Left about an hour ago." Nolan's chest tightened. "My suppressants." "He knows." Roan finally turned around. In the morning light, Nolan saw him properly. Early 30s, tall, broad through the shoulders, with dark eyes that gave nothing away and hands built for physical work. "How are you feeling?" "Sore, but fine." "Thank you." Roan nodded like the thanks made him uncomfortable. He did not push. Nolan noticed that right away. Roan noticed things, acted on them, but never pressured. "How old are you?" Roan asked, not intrusive, more like he was placing Nolan in context. 22. A beat passed. Roan took a sip of his coffee. "College?" "Senior year, University of Colorado, Geology Department." "And they sent you up here alone in December." "I volunteered. The erosion data is better after early freeze. The rock faces are more exposed." Nolan wrapped both hands around his mug. "It was supposed to be a 3-day trip. Drive up, collect samples, drive back. Weather moved fast. Yeah." The silence was fine. The dog moved from Roan's feet to Nolan's, pressing its large, warm body against his legs. Nolan reached down and scratched behind its ears. "That's Dutch," Roan said. "He doesn't usually go to strangers." Nolan scratched harder. Dutch leaned into it. Nash came back an hour later, stomping through the door in a cloud of snow and cold air. His cheeks burned red, and his energy filling the kitchen like a change in pressure. "Good news and bad news," he said, dropping into a chair and stealing Roan's coffee without asking. "Good news. Your car's not as trashed as it looked last night. Axle's fine, frame's fine. It's mostly body damage. I called Eddie at the garage. He'll tow it when the road opens." "And the bad news?" "The road is not opening today. Probably not tomorrow either. There's a drift across the switchback and the county plows are focused on the main highway." He took a long drink of the stolen coffee. "Also, I got to your glove box." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a black case. Nolan grabbed for it, then opened it and went still. The vials were shattered. The cold had gotten to them, or the impact, or both. The liquid suppressant had leaked through the foam lining and frozen into a useless crystalline mess. "I'm sorry," Nash said. "I tried to get there faster." Nolan stared at the ruined case. His brain was doing the math. Last dose was yesterday morning. Without a new dose, the suppressants in his system would wear off by tomorrow morning, and his body would start doing what he had spent 6 years preventing it from doing. "Hey," Nash leaned forward. "Talk to me. How bad is this?" "I've been on suppressants since I was 16. Nolan's voice came out flat and clinical, like he was describing someone else's problem. Continuous use. No breaks. If I go cold turkey, my body's going to try to recalibrate, which means my scent comes back. My cycle starts trying to reestablish, and I'm going to feel like I have the flu for a few days while my system adjusts. But no heat, right? Not right away? Probably not. Withdrawal from long-term suppression usually takes a week or two before a full heat cycle triggers, but the scent comes back fast. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. Nash and Roan exchanged a glance. Quick, barely a flash, but Nolan caught it. Two alphas in a house with an omega whose scent was about to come back online. "We have a guest cabin," Roan said. His voice was steady, matter of fact. "A short walk from the main house. Private, has its own heat, its own bathroom. You can stay there if you'd be more comfortable. Or you can stay in the house," Nash added. "We're not going to be weird about it. You're safe here." "Both options are fine," Roan said. "Your call." Nolan looked between them. Nash, open and warm, already leaning toward him like proximity was his default setting. Roan, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, holding distance, giving Nolan space to think without the pressure of closeness. "I'll stay in the house," Nolan said. "The cabin sounds cold, and I've had enough cold for one night." Nash grinned. Roan nodded once and went to refill the coffee Nolan was pretty sure Nash had stolen from him. The first day passed slowly. The storm did not let up. Nolan tried to work on his thesis from his laptop, but his concentration was shot, his body aching, his mind circling the suppressant problem. He ended up on the couch in the living room with Dutch pressed against his side, half reading a geology journal, half watching the snow. Nash drifted in and out. He could not sit still for long, always checking on the horses, bringing in firewood. But every time he passed through the living room, he stopped. "You want more coffee?" "I'm okay. You eat lunch yet?" "I'm fine, thanks." Nolan kept his answers short. Not rude, just careful. He did not know these people. They had saved his life and he was grateful, but gratitude did not make them friends. He was in their house because he had no choice, and that sat wrong in his chest. The feeling of being stuck somewhere, dependent on strangers for food and shelter and warmth. Nash did not seem bothered by the short answers. He dropped onto the other end of the couch, stretching his legs out. His scent was faint, held back by good manners and probably habit, but Nolan could catch traces of it. Warm and sweet, like honey left in the sun. "Can I ask you something?" Nash said. Nolan almost said no. Almost gave another one-word answer and went back to pretending to read. But Nash had carried him out of a car wreck and driven through a blizzard and was now sitting on his own couch asking a question like he actually wanted to hear the answer. "Sure. Why geology, of all things?" "I like rocks." "That's it? You like rocks?" "Rocks don't change. They're the most honest things on the planet. A rock is exactly what it looks like. You pick it up, you study it, and it tells you exactly what happened to it, how old it is, what forces shaped it, whether it was under pressure or heat or water. No guessing. No interpretation. Just evidence." Nash was watching him with an expression Nolan could not quite place. Interested, yes. But more than that, like Nolan had said something that mattered. "People should be more like rocks," Nash said. "People are terrible." "Not all of them." Nolan glanced at him. Nash held the look without flinching, without the smirk that would have made it a joke. He just sat there, open and certain, already paying attention. "How old are you?" Nolan asked, changing the subject because the eye contact was becoming a problem. 27. "And you live here? On the ranch? Full time?" "Born here. Left for college, came back. Roan never left." Nash's gaze went to the window. "This place is his life. He built half the outbuildings himself, got the conservation programs running. Negotiated the land trust. Our dad didn't give a damn about the property. Roan turned it into what it is. Your dad? Nash's expression tightened. Not a topic that makes either of us fun to be around. Short version. Alpha who treated people like a buffet. Mom raised us alone. She died when I was 12. Nash said it lightly. Nolan knew what that lightness cost. Roan appeared in the doorway. Nash. The generator's making that sound again. Which sound? The concerning one or the very concerning one? The one where I need you to look at it before we lose power. Nash hauled himself off the couch with theatrical reluctance, patting Nolan's knee as he stood. Duty calls. Try not to have too much fun without me. He headed for the door, and Nolan watched him go, then looked up to find Roan still standing in the doorway, watching him. Their eyes met. Roan looked away first and disappeared down the hall. It happened that night. Nolan was brushing his teeth in the guest bathroom when he caught it. Faint. Barely there. A scent coming from him, rising from his wrists and his neck with a warmth he had not felt since he was a teenager. Blood orange. Clean and bright, but underneath it a mineral coolness, like wet stone after rain. He stared at himself in the mirror and watched the flush creep up his throat as his body began, without permission, to become itself again. He went to bed and lay in the dark, trying to breathe through it. It was not painful. It was not even unpleasant. It was disorienting, like suddenly hearing a frequency you had been blocking out for so long you forgot it existed. His skin felt more awake. The sheets felt different. The house's smells, the wood smoke, the cold air leaking through the window frame, the coffee that someone had brewed earlier, all of it was louder, sharper, more present, and underneath all of it, two scent trails that he was picking up for the first time. One was deep and quiet, smoked pine and metal. It was everywhere in this room, in the bed frame, in the walls, in the blankets. Whoever owned this house had soaked into its bones. The other was lighter, honey and rain and a bright note that warmed his chest without asking. He pressed his face into the pillow. It was the withdrawal, just his system recalibrating, chemicals and biology doing what they did. He believed that for about 3 hours. Then the smell of smoked pine deepened, and his body shivered, and it had nothing to do with cold. In the morning, Nolan came out of the guest room and the kitchen froze. Nash was at the kitchen table halfway through a plate of eggs. He stopped with his fork in the air. His pupils blew wide. Roan was at the stove. His hand tightened on the spatula, knuckles going pale. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. The silence held for a full breath. Then Nash's chair scraped back an inch, involuntary, his body leaning toward the doorway before his brain caught up. Across the kitchen, Roan's jaw locked and he gripped the counter's edge with his free hand, anchoring himself in place. Both of them. The same second. Nolan felt it land on his skin, both their scents flaring in response, the pine deepening and the honey going thick, and then both pulling back at once, reining it in because they were decent men and this was not an invitation. Nolan stood in the doorway. His scent was out. Faint, but there, filling a room that had only ever held alpha pheromones. "Morning," he said. It came out strained. "Morning." Nash set down his fork. His eyes were slightly wider than usual. You smell." "Thanks." "No, I mean, you smell really good." Sorry, I'm going to stop talking." "Good plan." Roan had not spoken. He turned back to the stove, cracked 2 more eggs into the pan, and cooked them in absolute silence. When they were done, he slid them onto a plate, added toast, and set the plate at the empty seat at the table. All of this without looking at Nolan directly. "Eat," he said, in that same steady voice from last night. Then he picked up his own coffee and walked out of the kitchen. Nolan sat down. Nash was staring at his eggs with intense concentration. "Is he okay?" Nolan asked. He's fine. Nash rubbed the back of his neck. We both noticed. Your scent. It hit at the same time and he's Roan. He needs to go process it by standing alone in a field for 20 minutes. Should I be worried? No, absolutely not. He would literally die before he made you uncomfortable. Nash leaned back in his chair, visibly forcing himself to relax. Look, I'm going to be straight with you, because I think you'd rather hear it than wonder about it. You smell incredible. My brain just did a thing it's never done before, and I'm guessing Roan had the same reaction, which is why he left the room instead of standing there being weird about it. You're being kinda weird about it. Yeah, but I'm weird about everything. It's my whole personality. He grinned, and Nolan felt his shoulders drop half an inch. We're not going to make this a thing. You're stuck here. Your suppressants are gone. And your body's doing what it does. That's not an invitation, and we both know it, okay? Okay. Eat your eggs. Nolan ate his eggs. The next 2 days, Nolan loosened. The storm dumped another foot, the road stayed closed, and he got used to the shape of life at the ranch. Nash made it easy. He sat next to Nolan on the couch and their legs touched. He reached over to look at Nolan's laptop and his hand stayed on Nolan's shoulder too long. He made Nolan laugh about the dogs, the weather, his own terrible cooking. I can make exactly 2 things, Nash announced on the second evening, standing in the kitchen surrounded by what appeared to be a flour explosion. Scrambled eggs, which I'm good at, and biscuits, which are a war crime every time. Then why do you keep making biscuits? Hope springs eternal, Nolan. Nash turned and caught Nolan smiling at him. He held the look, flour on his cheek, a dish towel over his shoulder, and for a second the joking fell away, and what was underneath was honest and a little reckless. He liked Nolan. He was not subtle about it, and he was not trying to be. Nolan looked down at his laptop. His scent spiked, a quick hot flare of blood orange, and Nash exhaled sharply through his nose. Sorry, Nolan said. Don't apologize for smelling good. That's insane. You're staring. Can't help it. It's a medical condition. I looked it up. Nolan laughed despite himself, and Nash beamed, which was probably the point. Roan was different. He took care of things, silently, constantly, without credit. Fresh towels every morning. A new phone charger on the nightstand without comment. When Nolan mentioned his jacket was damp from the crash, a heavier coat appeared on the hook the next morning, the right size, no note. It was in the closet, Roan said when asked, and went back to whatever he was doing. He kept his distance, never touched Nolan unless necessary, but Nolan caught him looking, twice on the second day, once on the third. When Nolan looked up, Roan's gaze was already gone. On the third morning, Nolan found Roan on the porch, coatless in the freezing air, staring at the mountains. You're going to freeze, Nolan said. They sat on the bench, a careful distance apart. Nash said you built most of this place yourself. Nash talks a lot. He talks about you like you're a superhero. Roan's mouth pressed into a line. I'm not. Superheroes wear capes. You wear flannel. That got a real exhale, almost a laugh. You're funny. I didn't expect that. You're 22, and you drove up a mountain alone in December to look at rocks. I expected reckless. Reckless and funny aren't mutually exclusive. Nolan's scent was carrying in the cold air, the blood orange, crisp and bright. Roan, I know you can smell me. A long moment. I'm not pretending. I'm being respectful. But you look like you're in pain. Roan looked at him then, really looked, and the full force of an alpha's attention settled on Nolan. Careful. Searching. Underneath, a restraint that almost vibrated. You smell like blood orange and wet granite, and I'm doing my best here, Roan said quietly. That's all. They sat until Nolan started shivering, and then Roan stood, went inside, and came back with a blanket that he put over Nolan's shoulders. His fingers grazed the back of Nolan's neck as he pulled the blanket into place, and Nolan's breath hitched. Roan pulled his hand back fast. Too fast. Neither of them mentioned it. That evening, the three of them played cards at the kitchen table. For a while it was easy, Nash dealing, Roan winning quietly, Nolan laughing at both of them. Then Nash reached across the table and his arm brushed Nolan's, and Nolan's scent flared, hot and involuntary. Nash froze. His pupils blew wide. Roan stood. It's late. He rinsed the dishes and walked down the hall without another word. His door closed. Nash watched him go. The easy grin was gone. In its place was a quiet, hard-edged awareness. "Get some sleep, Nolan," Nash said, softer now. "Tomorrow's supposed to be clear." By the fourth morning, Nash took him out on the ATVs. The sky had broken open, sharp blue and painfully bright. They stopped at a ridge overlooking the valley, mountains in every direction, the ranch tiny below. "This is the best spot on the property," Nash said. "I used to come up here after Mom died. Roan was busy keeping everything from falling apart, and I was 12, and I didn't have anywhere else to go." His scent was everywhere, honey and rain, warm and unguarded. "Nash," Nolan said. "Yeah? Are you flirting with me right now?" Nash turned. The grin came back, but different now. Less performance, more real. "Little bit. Is that okay?" "I don't know." "That's an honest answer. I'm stuck in your house with no suppressants and your brother barely looks at me. I don't think I'm in a position to figure out what's okay." Nash's face went serious. He walked back from the edge and stood in front of Nolan, close but not crowding, his hands still in his pockets. "You want me to stop? I want you to tell me what you actually want. I want to know you. Beyond the thesis and the rock jokes and the way you pretend everything is fine when it isn't. I want the real stuff." He paused. "And yeah, I want to kiss you. But I'm not going to because you just said you don't know. And I don't take I don't know as a green light." Nolan's pulse jumped. "You could push. You've got the whole charming alpha thing down. I could. My dad was good at pushing too. And I'd rather be someone you trust than someone who moved too fast." There it was. Underneath the ease, underneath the jokes and the grin and the casual touching, genuine fear that he was his father's son in all the ways that counted. "Let's go back," Nolan said. "I'm freezing." Nash smiled, easier now. "See? You admitted it. Progress." They rode back to the ranch, and when Nash helped Nolan off the ATV, his hand lingered at Nolan's elbow, and Nolan let it. Nash's thumb traced a small circle against the inside of Nolan's arm, right over the pulse point, and Nolan's scent bloomed so fast he went dizzy for a second. Nash's nostrils flared. His hand tightened. Then he let go and stepped back, and the air between them was thick and charged, and neither of them said a word about it. That night, Nolan could not sleep. His scent was getting stronger. He could smell himself in the sheets, in the room, in the hallway when he got up for water. Blood orange and granite, and a new amber note underneath that kept surfacing when his guard was down, which was more and more often in this house with these men. He stood in the dark kitchen drinking water and heard the back door open. Roan came in from outside, boots wet. He saw Nolan and stopped. They looked at each other across the dark room. Nolan's scent filled the space between them. "Can I ask you something personal?" Nolan said. "You can ask. Why have you never been with anyone?" Roan set his glass down. "My dad treated people like they were replaceable. He'd get bored and leave, every time. I was 17 when my mom died, and he came to the funeral and left with someone he met at the reception. So I decided early that if there was any chance I had that in me, the best thing I could do was never put anyone in a position to find out. That's not a life, Roan. That's a maintenance schedule." "I know." Neither of them moved. The kitchen was dark and close, and Nolan's scent was beyond his control now, the amber note rising, warm and rich, reaching across the space between them. He saw Roan's nostrils flare, saw his hand tighten on the counter, saw the tendons in his forearm go taut. "You should go back to bed," Roan said. His voice had gone rough. "Yeah, I should." Nolan set his glass in the sink. He walked past Roan toward the hallway. As he passed, the gap between them narrowed 2 inches, and Roan's scent hit him full force, the pine gone deep and raw, the iron underneath sharp and hot, and Nolan flushed from his collarbone to his hairline. His knees went soft. He put a hand on the counter to stay upright, and his fingers landed an inch from Roan's. Neither of them breathed. Nolan pulled his hand back, kept walking. Behind him, he heard Roan exhale, slow and shaking, and then the back door opened and closed. Roan went outside. In the snow. In the cold. To stand alone and deal with what had just happened. Nolan lay in bed and pressed his hands to his face and tried to figure out when this had gotten so complicated. The 5th day, the road opened enough for Nash to make a supply run. He came back with groceries, a report on the car being towed, and suppressants from a pharmacy in town. Nolan picked up the box, read the label, set it down. He had built his life around these pills. His mother had bonded young, bonded hard, and when his father walked away, the bond tore a hole in her that never closed. He was 16 when he went to the doctor. His mother had driven him, had not tried to talk him out of it. He left the box on the table and went to find Roan. Roan was in the barn fixing a stall door. He looked up when Nolan appeared. "I haven't decided if I'm going to take them," Nolan said. They talked about the scent, about both brothers reacting. Roan shut it down. The age, the situation, the withdrawal. "Don't I get a say in what complicates my life? When you're not standing in my barn 5 days off suppressants with your scent making it very hard for me to think clearly." Nolan went back inside. He did not take the suppressants. That evening, Nash cooked. Actually cooked, not the biscuit disasters, but a real dinner. Chicken and roasted vegetables and something with garlic that filled the whole house. He had music playing from a speaker and he sang along, badly while he worked, and when Nolan offered to help, Nash put him in charge of cutting vegetables and stood close enough that their elbows bumped every time one of them moved. "You're in my space," Nolan said. "Your space is in my kitchen." "That doesn't even make sense." "Doesn't have to. I'm the cook. I make the rules." Nash reached past him for the pepper, and his chest pressed against Nolan's back for a full breath. Nolan felt the warmth of him through 2 layers of clothing, felt Nash's exhale move his hair, and his knees buckled for a half-second. Nash's hand came to rest on the counter beside Nolan's hip, bracketing him against the cutting board. Not trapping. Just close. Close enough that Nolan could feel Nash's heartbeat against his shoulder blade. "Nash. The pepper's behind you." "I know." Nash didn't move. His mouth was close enough to Nolan's ear that his words raised goosebumps. "I lied." Nolan turned his head. They were inches apart. Nash's eyes were dark, his scent gone thick and sweet, the honey note almost syrupy. Nolan's lips parted. Nash's gaze dropped to them. The oven timer went off and they jumped apart so fast Nolan almost cut himself with the knife. "That was the chicken," Nash said. His voice was not steady. "You should get it." "Yeah, I should." He got the chicken. Neither of them looked at each other for the next 5 minutes. They ate together, all 3. Nash talked enough for everyone. Roan contributed dry comments that made Nash argue and Nolan laugh. But Nolan noticed what he had not noticed before. Nash watched him openly, warmly. Roan watched the table, the food, the wall, anything that was not Nolan, and the effort was visible. After dinner, Nash put on a movie. When it ended, he squeezed Nolan's shoulder on his way to bed. His thumb brushed the side of Nolan's neck, just below the ear, where the scent gland sat. Half a second. Deliberate. Nolan's body went hot from his scalp to the soles of his feet. Nash disappeared down the hall. His bedroom door closed. Roan had not moved from the armchair. His knuckles were white on the armrest. "You saw that," Nolan said. "I see everything Nash does." Roan's voice was flat. "He's my brother. He touched my neck. I know what he did." Roan stood. "Go to bed, Nolan." "Roan, go to bed." He walked down the hall. His door closed, not a slam, just a firm, final click. Nolan sat alone on the couch and listened to the fire die and tried to understand why Roan's anger felt worse than Nash's touch had felt good. He did not take the suppressants. The 6th day broke the pattern. Nash took Nolan to town for lunch, just the two of them, off the property. The diner was small and warm, and Nolan felt like a different person sitting at a table that was not in the Han kitchen. Halfway through his burger, Nash set it down. "I've dated a lot of people. I'm good at beginnings, terrible at what comes after. I chase the spark, and when it settles, I get restless." He met Nolan's eyes. "Except with you, I don't feel restless. I feel like I could sit at this table for 6 hours and it still wouldn't be enough." Nash: "I know the timing is bad, but I think you deserve to know that someone is choosing you on purpose. Not because biology told him to, because I just like you." Nolan's throat tightened. He looked down at his grilled cheese and blinked hard. "Thank you for being honest." When they pulled into the driveway, Roan was on the porch, arms crossed, unreadable. "Where were you?" Roan asked Nash. "Took Nolan to town for lunch." "You didn't tell me." "Didn't know I needed permission." "He's going through withdrawal. He shouldn't be 30 minutes from the house." "He's 22, Roan, not a child." Roan looked at Nash for a long moment. "Don't do that again without telling me." He went inside. Nolan followed. The kitchen was empty. Roan's door was closed. The tension between the brothers settled into the house like a second weather system. After dinner, Nash went to check the horses. Nolan stayed at the table. "He took me to a diner," Nolan said to Roan's back. "We had grilled cheese. Nothing happened." "I know nothing happened." "Then why are you angry?" Roan turned from the sink. Water dripped from his hands. "I'm not angry." "Roan, I'm not angry at you." He grabbed a towel, dried his hands with too much force. "I'm angry at myself." "Why?" "Because he took you to lunch and I wished I'd done it first." The words hung in the kitchen. Roan's face closed down as fast as it had opened, and then the mask was back. "Forget I said that," Roan said. "I don't think I can." "Try." He hung the towel on the hook and left the kitchen. Nolan sat at the table alone. His heart was hammering. The amber in his scent had gone so warm the entire room smelled like him, sweet and bright, and he knew Roan could smell it from wherever he had gone. The 7th night, the power went out. No warning, no flickering, just darkness dropping over the house. The generator, the one Nash had been nursing for days, finally gave up with a grinding sound Nolan heard from his bedroom. He grabbed his phone flashlight and made it to the living room, where Roan was already building the fire back up and Nash was hunting for candles. The temperature was dropping fast. Without the furnace, the house would be unlivable in hours. "Generator's dead," Nash said, coming back with candles and a headlamp. "It's the compressor. I don't have the part." "Morning," Roan said. "We'll get the part from town in the morning." "That's 8 hours." "I know." They set up camp in the living room. Roan built the fire into a roaring thing that threw light and heat across the floor. Nash dragged in every blanket in the house. Nolan contributed his sleeping bag from the duffel. They ended up on the floor in front of the fire, Nash and Nolan on a pile of blankets, Roan on the couch because of course Roan chose the couch, the position that gave them space. "Come down here," Nash said. "You look like a chaperone." "I'm fine. You're freezing. I can see your breath." "Nash." "Roan." They stared at each other. A conversation in a language built over decades of brotherhood and loss, and the constant pull of two alphas who had spent their entire lives negotiating the space between them. Roan came down from the couch. He sat on the opposite side of the blanket pile from Nash with Nolan between them. Not touching either of them, but close. Close enough that when Nolan's scent rose in the warm air from the fire, all three of their scents mixed for the first time. It was unlike anything Nolan had experienced. The blood orange and the smoked pine and the honey did not blend. They harmonized. Three separate things that created a fourth, a chord that none of them could make alone. Warm and full, it filled the room, and Nolan felt it in his chest, in his throat, behind his eyes. Nobody spoke. The fire cracked. The wind pushed against the windows. Dutch pressed himself against Nolan's side and sighed. Nash's fingers slid between Nolan's under the blanket, interlacing, holding on. His thumb ran slow circles across Nolan's knuckles, and the touch sent warmth up Nolan's arm and into his ribs. On his other side, Roan did not touch him, but his arm was close enough that Nolan could feel the warmth radiating from it, and his scent had gone loose. The pine deep and resinous, and the iron underneath steady as a pulse. Nolan shifted. His shoulder pressed against Roan's arm. Roan went rigid. Nolan pressed closer. And slowly, degree by degree, Roan's body softened against him. Nolan felt the moment Roan exhaled and stopped holding himself apart. Felt the tension leave his shoulder and his arm and his jaw. Roan's head tilted, barely, until his temple rested against the top of Nolan's head. On Nolan's left, Nash's hand tightened. His thumb stopped moving. Nolan was touching both of them, holding one, leaning against the other, and his scent had gone wild, the amber note pouring off him, sweet and uncontrolled, and both alphas were breathing it in, and neither of them was pulling away. He fell asleep between them. When he woke in the early hours, Nash was asleep on his left, curled toward him, one hand still holding his. On his right, Roan was awake, staring at the ceiling, his face drawn, his breathing controlled. Their eyes met in the firelight. Roan reached out, slow and deliberate, and pulled the blanket higher over Nolan's shoulders. His fingers trailed down Nolan's arm as he drew his hand back, a touch so light it barely registered on the skin, but burned all the way through. Nolan's lips parted. His scent pulsed. Roan's eyes went dark. Then he pulled his hand back, turned his face away, put the wall back up. Nolan lay in the dark between them and knew, with a certainty that felt like a rock in his hand, solid and impossible to argue with, that this could not hold. The 8th morning, Nash found him on the porch. Last night on the floor. My whole system locked in, and I could feel Roan having the same reaction. His scent went wide open. Nash looked at the mountains. I'm not stepping back. Nolan stared at him. I've spent my whole life making room for Roan. I love him, but I'm done sacrificing what I want because he can't figure out how to take it for himself. If he wants you, he needs to say it. I'm not clearing the field just because he's been alone longer. He went inside. Nolan sat on the porch and felt the weight of what was coming pressed down on his chest. It came that afternoon. Nolan was in the kitchen when he heard the voices from the barn. Not shouting, not yet, but loud enough to carry through the closed door. He pulled on boots and walked across the yard. The barn door was cracked open. He could hear them clearly. You need to back off. Roan's voice. Low and controlled, but the control was cracking. No. Nash. Flat. Final. I don't. He's vulnerable. He's going through withdrawal. He doesn't need two alphas circling him like he's prey. Is that what you think I'm doing? Circling him? I think you're doing what you always do. You see something you want and you go after it without thinking about what happens when you get bored. Silence. When Nash spoke again, his voice was different, hurt and hard at the same time. That's what you think of me? I think you've never stayed with anyone longer than 3 months. And you've never stayed with anyone at all. At least I try, Roan. At least I put myself out there instead of hiding behind a screwdriver and pretending I don't want things. I'm trying to protect him. You're trying to protect yourself. You want him. I can smell it on you every time he walks into a room, but you'd rather stand in this barn and convince yourself you're being selfless than actually do something about it. He's 22. He's an adult who can make his own choices. Stop using his age as an excuse for your cowardice. The word hit like a slap. Nolan heard the silence that followed it, thick and loaded. Get out of my barn, Roan said. It's our barn. Nash. Get out. Nolan stepped back from the door. Nash came out a second later, his face tight, his scent sharp with anger. He saw Nolan and stopped. You heard that, Nash said. Yeah. Nash's jaw worked. I'm sorry. That wasn't fair to you. It wasn't about me. It's always about you, Nolan. That's the problem. He walked past him toward the house. Nolan stood in the yard between the house and the barn, between two brothers who wanted him and could not figure out how to want him without breaking each other, and felt the first real stab of fear that this was going to end badly for everyone. He went inside. He sat on his bed. He looked at the box of suppressants on the nightstand, and for the first time since the crash, he thought about leaving. Dinner was silent. Roan cooked. Nash ate without speaking. Nolan sat between them, and the silence was different from every other silence they had shared. This one was hostile. The scents in the room were wrong. Too sharp. Too separate. The harmony from the night before completely gone. After the dishes were done, Nash grabbed his jacket. Where are you going? Roan asked. Out. It's below 0. I'll survive. The door closed behind him. Roan stood at the sink with his hands braced on the counter, his head bowed. Nolan watched him from the table. This is my fault, Nolan said. No. It is. You two were fine before I showed up. You had a life here. You had each other. And now you're fighting because of me, and I can fix that by taking my suppressants and getting in my car and leaving. Roan lifted his head. Your car isn't ready. Then I'll take a bus. Nolan. I'm serious, Roan. I am not going to be the thing that destroys your family. I've seen what that looks like. I grew up watching it. My mother loved an alpha who left and it ate her alive, and I swore I would never be the reason that happens to someone else. His voice cracked on the last word. Nolan pressed his palms flat on the table to steady himself. Roan turned from the sink. He crossed the kitchen. He stood in front of Nolan, close, closer than he had ever voluntarily stood, and Nolan could feel the warmth of him and smell the pine and iron, and the raw, exposed undercurrent that Roan usually kept buried. You are not your mother's story, Roan said. You don't know my mother's story. I know enough. I know you spent 6 years on suppressants because you were afraid of ending up like her. I know you're sitting in my kitchen threatening to leave because you think wanting things leads to getting hurt. And I know that's not a reason. That's a cage. You're one to talk about cages. Roan flinched. Nolan saw it and wished he could take it back. I'm sorry, Nolan said. Don't be. You're right. Roan's voice was raw. I've been in a cage my whole adult life. I built it myself, and I was fine in it until you showed up smelling like blood orange and granite and started asking me questions nobody else has ever bothered to ask. They were close. Too close. Nolan's scent had gone haywire, the amber note thick and sweet, pouring off him in waves, and Roan's pine had deepened until it was almost resinous, almost liquid, the iron underneath pulsing like a second heartbeat. The air between them felt heavy and charged, and Nolan's skin was prickling everywhere. Don't leave, Roan said. Give me a reason. Roan's hand came up, hovered near Nolan's face. Nolan could see his fingers trembling. I can't compete with Nash, Roan said. He's easier, he's warmer, he knows how to say the right thing. I don't know how to do any of that. I just know how to fix things and take care of things and stand in the cold until I stop feeling things, and none of that is enough. You're wrong. About what? All of it. The coat on the hook, the phone charger, the path you shovel, the coffee you make before I'm awake. That's not nothing, Roan. That's the loudest thing anyone has ever said to me. His hand was still hovering. Nolan reached up and pressed Roan's palm to his own cheek. The touch was a detonation. Roan's fingers spread across Nolan's face, his thumb on Nolan's cheekbone, his palm warm and rough and shaking. Nolan leaned into it and felt his body tip toward Roan, his scent spiking so hard the room smelled like a citrus grove in summer. Roan's breath caught. His other hand came up and framed Nolan's face, both hands now, holding him like he was afraid he would disappear. Roan, I know. If you kiss me, everything changes. Everything already changed, the night you walked into my kitchen smelling like yourself for the first time. His thumb traced Nolan's lower lip. Slow. Deliberate. Nolan's mouth fell open and his eyes closed and his hands came up and gripped Roan's wrists because he needed to hold on to something solid. Roan kissed him. It was not smooth, not practiced. It was a man who had never done this, pressing his mouth to someone else's for the first time at 32. Tentative and gentle, and then less gentle as Nolan kissed him back and pulled him closer by the wrists. Roan made a sound against his mouth, low and involuntary, and his hands slid from Nolan's face to the back of his neck, to his hair, tilting his head back. Nolan's spine arched, his hands released Roan's wrists and fisted in the front of his flannel shirt and pulled, and Roan stepped forward, pressing Nolan back against the table, and the full length of their bodies met for the first time, and the scents between them exploded. Pine and orange and iron and amber, a smell so thick and sweet and charged that Nolan gasped into Roan's mouth. Roan pulled back, his forehead pressed against Nolan's, his breathing was ragged. "Tell me to stop," he said. "No." "Nolan, no. I've been waiting 6 days for you to do that and I am not telling you to stop." Roan's laugh was breathless and broken and real. His hands were still shaking where they held the back of Nolan's neck. Nolan could feel the restraint in every muscle of Roan's body, the effort it was taking to hold himself back, to be careful, to not be the man his father was. Nolan kissed him again, softer this time, pulling Roan's bottom lip between his, tasting pine and iron and salt from tears neither of them was going to acknowledge. The back door opened. Nash stood in the doorway, snow in his hair, cold air pouring in around him. He saw Roan's hands in Nolan's hair, saw Nolan's fists in Roan's shirt, saw them pressed together against the kitchen table. Nobody moved. Nash's face went white, his jaw clenched, his fists balled at his sides and then slowly, deliberately, unclenched. "So that's how it is," Nash said. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Nash." Roan stepped back from Nolan but did not let go entirely. His hand stayed on Nolan's waist. "Don't." Nash held up a hand. "Don't explain it. I'm not blind. I knew this was coming. I just thought." He stopped, swallowed. "I thought I'd at least get a heads up before I walked in on it." "Nothing was planned," Nolan said. "Yeah, with Roan nothing ever is. That's his whole move. He doesn't pursue, doesn't flirt, doesn't take anyone to lunch. He just stands there being steady and selfless until people fall into him." Nash's voice cracked on the last word. "And the worst part is I can't even be mad because he didn't do it on purpose. He never does. He just is." "Nash, please." "I said I wasn't stepping back. I said I was going to compete, and then I walked outside for 20 minutes and lost." He laughed and the sound was ugly and wet. "That's almost funny." He walked past them, down the hall, His bedroom door closed. The silence after was enormous. Roan's hand was still on Nolan's waist. Nolan could feel him shaking. "Go talk to him," Nolan said. "He doesn't want to talk to me right now. He needs to. He needs space. I know my brother. You know the brother who doesn't get hurt. This is different." Roan looked at the hallway. His jaw was tight. His scent had gone heavy with guilt, the pine soured and the iron gone flat. "Tomorrow," Roan said. "I'll talk to him tomorrow." Neither of them slept together that night. Nolan went to the guest room alone. He lay in the dark and smelled Roan on his skin and tasted him on his lips and heard Nash's voice crack. The next morning, Nash was gone. His truck missing. His duffel gone. A note on the kitchen table. "Went to town, staying with Eddie for a couple days. Need space." Roan read it once and went outside. Nolan heard the axe start. He chopped firewood for 3 hours. They did not need firewood. Nolan took his suppressants, did not tell Roan, just swallowed 2 pills and felt his body begin to quiet. The amber faded first. By afternoon his scent was muted. Roan came in, saw the open box. "You took them." "Nash is sleeping at a stranger's house because of me. I walked into your life and broke it." "You didn't break anything. Your brother left. That's your mother's funeral all over again. Someone leaving because of a bond." Roan went still. "That's not fair. None of this is fair." He went to the guest room, closed the door, cried silently into his hands. 2 days later, on the morning Nolan was supposed to leave, he came downstairs with his bags and found both brothers in the kitchen. Nash was back, tired, eyes red. But there, the air between the brothers was different, still wounded, but no longer hostile. "Sit down," Nash said. "Please." Nolan sat. His scent was barely a whisper. "We talked for most of last night," Nash said. "I was selfish. I came at this like a race and treated you like a prize. I'm sorry." He looked at Nolan. "What happened between us was real. But what's between you and Roan is bigger than what I'm offering. I'm honest enough to see it." His smile was thin and cost him everything. "But you need to stop running. Both of you. You're sitting here with your bags packed and your scent turned off, and you're both so afraid of repeating your parents' mistakes that you're about to make a brand new one." Silence. "You're leaving. And if you leave, you're the one who walks away. You're not your mother. You're not our dad. You're just scared. And being scared is not the same as being doomed." Nolan looked at Roan. Roan was looking at him. "I took the suppressants to make this easier. It made it worse. I can't smell you anymore, and it's worse." Roan crossed the kitchen, stood in front of Nolan's chair. "Stay," he said. Nolan looked at Nash, wet eyes and a real smile. "Go on," Nash said, "before he loses his nerve." Nolan stood. "I'm going to stop taking them. And I want you to know it's a choice. Not the withdrawal. Not the storm. This is me, choosing you, on purpose." Roan's hand came to the side of Nolan's face. Warm. Rough. Steady now, not shaking. "Okay. I'm done running." He kissed him. In the kitchen. In front of his brother. In the daylight, with the coffee getting cold and Dutch whining at the door and the mountains white and enormous outside the window. He kissed Nolan like a man who was learning that wanting things did not have to end in loss. And Nolan kissed him back and tasted pine and iron and the salt of everything they had both been too afraid to say. When they pulled apart, Nash was no longer at the table. He had slipped out quietly. Through the window, Nolan could see him crossing the yard toward the barn, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders square. "Is he going to be okay?" Nolan whispered. "He's the toughest person I've ever met. He'll be okay. I need him to be. I need you both to be." Roan's thumb traced Nolan's cheekbone. "We will be." That night they sat on the couch together, side by side. Nolan's head against Roan's shoulder, Roan's arm around him. The fire crackled. Dutch slept at their feet. Tell me something I don't know about you, Nolan said. I can't cook. Nash told me that already. I have a fear of deep water. Really? Can't see the bottom. Don't trust it. The man who lives on a mountain is afraid of water. Mountains don't move. Water does whatever it wants. Nolan tilted his head to look up at him. Tell me something real. Roan was quiet for a moment. His fingers found the ends of Nolan's hair, brushing through it slowly, and Nolan felt it in his scalp, his neck, the base of his spine. I heard you the other night, he said, in the kitchen, when you listed everything I'd done. The coat, the charger, the path. A pause. Nobody has ever noticed those things before. Nobody has ever done them for me before. They should have. They didn't. You did. Roan's fingers moved from Nolan's hair to the side of his neck, tracing a slow line down to his collarbone. Nolan's breathing went shallow. His scent was coming back, the suppressants losing the fight against what his body wanted, the amber surfacing through the flatness, reaching for the pine. I'm going to take this slow, Roan said. I need it to be right. I need to know this isn't just the circumstances. Roan, I followed you into a barn to yell at you about your feelings. That's not circumstances. That's a choice. Let me take it slow anyway. Okay. Nolan turned his face into Roan's neck and breathed him in. Pine and iron and the warmth underneath. This close, the scent was enormous, and Nolan's body responded with its own, the amber rising, warm and certain. He pressed his lips to the skin just below Roan's jaw, felt the pulse there jump, felt Roan's arm tighten around him. Nolan, I'm not doing anything. Just breathing. You are doing several things and none of them are just breathing. Nolan smiled against his throat. Roan's hand cupped the back of his head and held him there, and they stayed like that. Nolan's mouth against Roan's neck, Roan's hand in his hair, neither of them moving, both of them burning, until the fire died down and the cold crept in and they had to separate. Come back, Roan said when Nolan stood to go to the guest room. I'm right down the hall. No, I mean, when you leave, when your car's fixed, go finish your semester, but come back. Is that you asking? That's me asking. I'll come back. The road opened fully on day 11. Nash loaded Nolan's bags into the car. Nash pulled him into a hug that was too tight and exactly right. Text me when you get there safe. And if my brother does anything stupid, call me. Nash let go, grinned, and turned away before Nolan could see the rest. Roan reached into the truck and pulled out a box. Inside, packed in foam, were 6 rock samples from the ridge, labeled in his handwriting with GPS coordinates. Nash told me what kind of samples you need for your thesis. Nolan stared at the careful labels. You climbed the ridge in the snow to get me rock samples. It was on the way to the... Nolan kissed him. Standing beside his beat-up car with Nash pretending not to watch from the barn doorway and Dutch on the porch looking unimpressed, Roan went still, then softened, then kissed him back. Drive safe. The switchback at mile 9 is still icy. I know. I crashed there. I remember. Nolan rolled down the window as he pulled out. I'll be back in 3 weeks. Check your phone. I'm going to text you. I'll check my phone. He drove down the mountain. In the rearview mirror, Roan stood in the driveway until the road curved. 3 weeks later, Nolan came back. With his thesis draft, a suitcase, and no suppressants. Roan saw his car from the porch and walked down to meet him before he had parked. You made it. Counted the days, Roan said quietly. They hiked to the ridge. Nolan crouched beside a rock face and ran his fingers along the glacial striations, grooves carved by ice over thousands of years. Slow, massive pressure applied over time. I talked to my advisor. She approved a full-year independent study based on the erosion data from this site. I'd need a place to stay. Nolan. Know anyone with a guest room and too many dogs? Roan's hand tightened around his. The pine in his scent went warm. He looked at Nolan and smiled, real and unguarded and wide. Yeah, I know someone. 6 months later, the kitchen table was covered in rock samples and thesis pages and 3 coffee mugs. Dutch lay under the table, chin on Nolan's bare foot. Nash leaned against the counter eating toast, asking about the committee meeting. Roan came in from outside, poured 2 coffees, set one by Nolan's laptop, and kissed the top of his head. Nolan looked up. Nash at the counter, Roan beside him. The kitchen warm and messy and lived in. His scent mixed with the smoked pine in the walls and the honey that drifted in whenever Nash opened the door. He thought about rocks, about how the most powerful forces in geology were not the dramatic ones, but the slow ones. Pressure applied over time. Water moving through stone. Forces so patient they were invisible, reshaping everything while nobody watched. Roan reached under the table and took Nolan's hand. Warm fingers, rough palms. Nolan held on. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.